Back in the days when vinyl was king, a double album release from your favorite band was truly an exciting event. First and most obviously because of all the extra music that you would get. There's only so much music you can cram onto a side of vinyl before the sound quality is severely compromised. And this became a non-issue with the advent of CDs. Now you could cram a double album's worth of material onto one disc if you wanted. And it just wasn't the same. There was something about picking up that double album in the record store. It felt substantial in your hands. You knew you really had something. But it wasn't just more music. With a double album, you knew you were in for a real musical journey. All that extra space allowed bands to stretch out, experiment, try things they'd never done before. Every great double album I can think of, including the three I'm covering today, contain material that's unlike anything else these artists had done before or since, and that's a great thing. Just a quick reminder, donations at Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal are much appreciated. Links in the description of all my videos. I make zero money from ad revenue on this channel due to the fact that I use so much copyrighted material. Any revenue goes to those copyright owners, not me. So again, it's very much appreciated. Do consider it if you enjoy the content. Also, like, subscribe, share, blah, blah, blah. All right, let's do it. Dear Prudence, won't you come by to play? The Beatles, now of course just commonly known as the White Album, was probably the first double album I ever bought. People like Zappa and Dylan had done double albums previously, but it was still kind of a novelty at this point. For me, one of the greatest things about this album is the way it perfectly illustrates the Beatles' ability to constantly reinvent themselves and take a left turn just when the rest of the pop music world was struggling to catch up with what they had already done. Remember, this is 1968. We're still fresh off the heels of Psychedelia and the Summer of Love. I mean, just look at the album covers of the two previous records, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Magical Mystery Tour. Bright colors, all kinds of craziness. And compared to the White Album, the brilliance of the plain white cover, just an embossed Beatles logo on the front, not even a track listing on the back cover. And this was all a conscious decision by the group, by the way. This is the way they thought. We've already done the psychedelic thing to death. Time to move on, break some new ground. And the music itself was a radical departure as well. Previously, the arrangements had been complex and dense. As engineer Geoff Emerick said, everything had to be phased or bathed in some kind of effect. Now it was stripped down. At many points, this album sounds like what we would now call an unplugged record. Lots of sparse acoustic arrangements. One writer described the White Album as a salute to the history of Western music, and I thought that was pretty astute. I doubt the group started with that objective in mind, but just look at all the eclectic material on here. You've got elements of classical in Piggies with the harpsichord. You've got folk/country, things like Blackbird and Rocky Raccoon. You've got proto-heavy metal with Helter Skelter and Everybody's Got Something to Hide. You've got Back in the USSR, which is a tribute to both Chuck Berry and the Beach Boys, with a bit of Paul's quirky humor injected into the lyrics. You've got Avant Garde with John's insane Revolution No. 9. always a polarizing track on this record. My God, you've even got a lullaby, Good Night, which closes the album, written by John for his young son Julian and given to Ringo to sing because John felt it was just a bit too sentimental to do himself. There are so many little gems on this record that are criminally overlooked within the Beatles catalog. I don't even know where to begin with that, but let's take a look at I Will, which is a classic McCartney tune. Gorgeous melody, perfectly crafted pop song that should have been a huge hit. The progression is fairly simple in the key of F. 1, 6, 1, 6, 4, 5 is really common, but he substitutes 2 for the 4. That's a G minor. C7, of course, is the 5. Back to 1, 6. A little bit of a change here. We go to the 3 instead of the 2. A minor, and I love this one. Paul uses this a lot. Instead of going to the 1 chord F, we get an F7. That puts you on the edge of your seat. That's what we call a secondary dominant. It's the 5 of 4, and it resolves to the 4, B flat. And from there, we just continue on like nothing happened, right back in the key of F, but it's a nice little shake-up. 5, 6, 1, 4, 5, 1. Who knows how long I've loved you? You know I love you still. Will I wait a lonely lifetime? If you want me to, I will. For if I ever saw you, I didn't catch your name, but it never really mattered. I will always feel the same. One final observation I'd like to make about this one. For me, the White Album has always had a sort of nighttime feel. I don't know if this sounds crazy, but I've always felt that some albums are morning albums, some albums great for a lazy afternoon, and others that you want to listen to late at night. And this is definitely one of those for me. Somewhere near the end of side 3, I'd say, it takes on a distinct creepy vibe, and I mean that in the best way. But something about the way, for example, Sexy Sadie fades into Helter Skelter. Then you've got Long, 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 which closes side 3. It's so quiet you feel like you have to turn up the volume to hear it properly. And then you get hit with that ghostly wail from George at the end. It's really very chilling. And don't even get me started on side 4. Cry Baby Cry has always had a real sinister feel to me. Then there's that little snippet of music Paul does, the segue between Cry Baby Cry and Revolution number 9. The Can You Take Me Back Where I Came From. Very creepy. And of course then Revolution number 9 itself. If you've ever listened to that alone in a darkened room at night, it's kind of terrifying. So let me know what you guys think. Am I nuts here, or do you see what I'm saying? Exile on Main Street was the culmination of what the vast majority of fans and critics consider to be the golden era of the Stones, starting with Beggar's Banquet and including Let It Bleed, Sticky Fingers, and this double album masterpiece. The Stones have certainly done some great things since then, but I don't think they ever match the pure, menacing, rock and roll raunchiness of this one. And to get back to a theme from my earlier segment, this is absolutely a nighttime album. The nocturnal feel is evident right from the blistering opening track, Rocks Off, whose title leaves little doubt about the subject matter. Remember, the Stones have always had a much more, shall we say, erotic bent than the Beatles. And that great line, "The sunshine bores the daylights out of me, chasing shadows, moonlight mystery." And none of this should be surprising. The majority of the album was conceived and recorded in the basement of the group's rented villa in the south of France known as Nelcot. The bulk of work was done late at night and in the wee hours of the morning. The sessions were notoriously chaotic. Apparently, you never knew who was going to show up and what state they would be in, even if they did. But it all adds up to a chaotic, anarchic vibe that is pure rock and roll. Funny enough, another parallel for me with the White Album, again, near the end of side 3, it takes on a very mellow, slightly eerie tone with "I Just Want to See His Face" and "Let It Loose." "I Just Want to See His Face" is a dark gospel jam. The way it's recorded, it almost sounds as if they placed the microphones in the hallway or in the next room. It feels like we're walking down a corridor and the band is in another room jamming as we pass by. But it's really effective. Some have complained about the production on this album, but you would not want this to be done in a slick way. Exile on Main Street is a classic example of an album that was conceived as an album rather than just a vehicle for a handful of hit singles. In fact, in spite of its length, there were only 2 singles released, both only moderately successful by Stones standards. You had Tumblin' Dice and Happy with the great Keith Richards vocal. But that's okay. This is not an album for the casual Stones fan. Once again, there's so many great tunes to choose from, but Sweet Virginia has got to be up there among my favorites. It's that great Stones acoustic blues style. This one might have fit in well on Beggar's Banquet, right along with things like Dear Doctor and Factory Girl. It's loaded with drug references, not exactly unusual for a Stones song of this period. In the opening verse, it sounds like the narrator has indulged a bit too much and is about to attempt to counteract the effects with some pills. Waiting through the waste, stormy winter, and there's not a friend to help you through. Trying to stop the waves behind your eyeballs. Drop your reds, drop your greens and blues. And verse 2 again makes it clear that this drug and alcohol-fueled life is not for the timid. Thank you for your wine, California. Thank you for your sweet and bitter fruit. Yes, I've got the desert in my toenail, and I hid the speed inside my shoe. And then at the close of the chorus, we get one of Mick's greatest lines, "Got to scrape that shit right off your shoes." I love the double entendre there. Of course, in a literal sense, it could refer to eliminating the traces of whatever he was trying to smuggle in his shoe. But it's also a metaphor for the need to rid oneself of anything harmful or unsavory in life. Wading through the waste, stormy winter, and there's not a friend to help you through. Try and stop the waves behind your eyeballs. Drop your reds, drop your greens and Physical Graffiti. Not only one of the greatest rock albums of all time, but one of the greatest album covers of all time. This thing is a work of art designed by a guy called Peter Corriston. You got these little windows, little cutouts in the sleeve. Of course, on the front side, you have the lettering that spells out the album title. Turn it around in the back, there are cutouts there as well. No lettering, so we just get the plain shade there. Now you pull this thing out of here and you realize what you're seeing is just this little sleeve that encloses the two dust jackets. And these have all kinds of little vignettes, all kinds of crazy scenes going on here, including the various members of the band in drag, and some scenes where I'm not exactly sure what's going on, and I don't know if I want to know, but it's endlessly fascinating. Physical Graffiti was originally conceived as a single album. The group had recorded 8 new songs, but because many of Zeppelin's songs are longer than average, they had enough material to fill about 3 sides. So they decided to include some tracks that had not made it to their 3 previous albums, Zeppelin 3, Zeppelin 4, and Houses of the Holy, and make it a double. And it's a great thing that they did. At first you might say, well, if these are rejects, why do I want them on an album? But come on, this is Led Zeppelin here. These are great songs. Things like Down by the Seaside, Night Flight, and Houses of the Holy. And for me, this perfectly illustrates the magic of double albums that I was talking about earlier. Okay, so maybe these tracks didn't quite fit the mood of the albums they were originally intended for, but here you've got time. You can afford to veer off on a tangent a little bit and then maybe get back to the main theme later on side 4, for example. And I would hate to imagine not having these songs in the Zeppelin catalog. Of course, this album contains the usual Zeppelin mix of hard rock, blues, and sort of Celtic folk that has characterized all of their albums. But once again, there's the ability to branch out. There's the aforementioned Down by the Seaside, for example. I recently read that the band was apparently influenced by Neil Young on this. That's a real head scratcher for me. I absolutely don't hear it, but it's fascinating. That's the way influence works sometimes. Somehow Neil triggered something and they went off and did their own thing with it. It's great. You've got Kashmir, which is definitely hard rock, but has that exotic world music vibe. It's totally hypnotic. You've got Boogie with Stu, which is really just a cover of an old Ritchie Valens tune, like nothing these guys had done before. I've always loved Jimmy Page's little acoustic instrumental, Bran O'Reilly. Excuse me for the pronunciation, it's Welsh. This one, of course, was originally intended for the Zeppelin 3 album. You might remember there was a tune on that record called Bran O'Reilly Stomp, which is more up-tempo than this and has drums and a vocal. This one is pure guitar, and it's beautiful. It serves as a nice little link between In the Light and Down by the Seaside. It's in a wacky tuning. Page loves his unusual tunings. It's called C6 tuning. That's C, A, C, G, C, E. And just strumming the strings there, it already has a very mysterious and atmospheric sound. Tunings like this produce a very resonant sound, and they can allow you to get interesting chord voicings that would not be possible in standard tuning. Stuff like this. I mean, come on, that's amazing. That chord wouldn't sound very good if you strummed it. Kind of ugly and messy, but Page wisely arpeggiates it and it sounds beautiful. I think I'm going to call that a D minor 6-9. We've got D on the bottom, that's the root. C is the flatted 7th. B is the 6th. F is the flatted 3rd. And E is the 9. Amazing.